believers and the wicked might have been delayed. The delay is only a respite. It never means that God has neglected or left the rebellious ones. Once for all, it is His grace that does not make haste in the punishment, and when ultimately it has to come, it surely comes. Verse 15. It is commonly seen in the world that man, in spite of God's grace and mercy done to him and the bounties showered on man, when given prosperity, forgets the beneficent Lord, the giver of all his wealth and happiness, and gets puffed up with his prosperity and thinks that what was given to him was his due and will last forever. Verse 16. And when man is given in the measure, restricted to his actual needs or according to the situation, circumstanced by himself, but not up to his own lust and expectation, he is depressed in the adversity, putting the blame upon God's grace not having been granted to him, and complains to have been degraded and lowered in the eyes of the others. Verse 17. Even when favored by fortune and granted prosperity with abundant wealth, man does not think of the destitute orphans, the helpless poor ones struggling hard under the pressure of the needs of their life, and the life of their poor family and innocent children. Man wastes his wealth on his lust for luxury and enjoyments, but does not supply the needs of the needy. It is a denial of God being responsible for the straightness, the actions of man himself being responsible for it. AP. Verse 18. When a man is under the grip of his own hard-heartedness and is void of a charitable disposition, he finds plausible excuses for his own shortcomings and defects, and even obstructs the others from being charitable and kind to others. Verse 19. People used to deprive women and children of their dues in the property and used to devour their share. Also, it implies in general the misappropriation of any trusts entrusted by the trustees. Verse 22. Coming of the Lord, means issue of his command 11, and the coming of the angels, arrival of the punishment through the angels concerned with the act of chastisement. This is one of the verses which the anthropomorphists quote in favor of their doctrine, but when the irrefutable reason supported by Quran proves the absolute unity of God in his essence and attributes, such expressions should be interpreted in such a way to be in conformity with reason. The Absolute One is far from being subject to motion. Therefore, his coming means his final manifestation of his authority. AP. Verse 23. When the decree will have been passed and the punishment is to be executed, the respite had ended, and the time for repentance would have gone. No amount of repentance would be of any avail. Verse 24. The repentant will wish for having sent good deeds to be of avail to him on that occasion. But the time given for action had gone. This indicates that the life hereafter is not only a continuation but a development which actually deserves to be called life. 12. AP. On them shall be the fire closed over 90. 20. Commentary. Verse 1. City, i.e., Mecca. The people were already aware of the sanctity of the place which was chosen by the great prophet Abraham, where at the command of the Lord he left his wife Hagar and his son Ishmael. For the connection of Ishmael's name with Arabia is historic fact through Kedar, son of Bema. This is vouched by the Old Testament. General 25:13, 18 ps. 125, Isa. 42:11, 67. Abraham and Ishmael had built the holy Kaaba which they razed, dedicating it exclusively for the remembrance of the Lord. 13. And Abraham in his prayers to the Lord wanted a prophet to be raised in his seed and to raise some holy 114 who would uphold the sanctity of the house and maintain it in purity and glorification. 15. The sanctity of the Kaaba was a fact even before Abraham, which is given out in 3:96, wherein the first house of God was in Mecca. 16. Verse 2. It is given as an exclusive privilege to the holy prophet to act freely in the city irrespective of the conventional observance of the sanctity of the place, i.e. to use force, arrest the disbelievers, punish them, deal with them as he deems necessary in the execution of his duties as the apostle of God, which freedom none else had or would ever have, till the end of the world. This refers to the freedom that God gave the holy prophet when he had to enter Mecca by force to free the holy place from the control of the pagans who had desecrated the holy house by turning it into the center of idol worship and all kinds of barbaric customs and rituals, and restored it once again to be exclusively used as the holiest of the holy for worshipping none but the one true God, the Lord of the universe. None else thereafter was allowed even to pluck out a plant or even a blade of grass or kill any living being, to drag out even anyone who takes shelter therein. Refer, Fiqh. The interpretation of the word, hill, has also been taken as having descended, i.e. the Holy Prophet had been born at Mecca, by which also the sanctity of the place is established because he was the one prayed for by Abraham. Dut 18:18, 2, 129 and promised by God to send as the final deliverer of mankind, who would convey to the human race God's final word, the Holy Quran, and teach them the most perfect code of life, i.e. the religion Islam, to be current for all times until the end of the world. 2. 129 and who would be the mercy to the worlds. 21. 107. This establishes the natural phenomenon that the honor, the regard or the reverence of a premises is due to its occupant and not that the occupant receives the grace on account of the premises. The swearing in the name of the city of Mecca has been done to disclose to mankind the excellence of the holy personality of the Holy Prophet and the greatness of its position in view of the Lord. 17. The commentators give different interpretation of, still, the most appropriate one is the settler, and the next is unfettered, as the passage indicates that the respect or the importance of the city is due to his being a citizen of it or due to his being the sole person who has the right to exercise authority in the city, which is not allowed for anyone else. Thus, wherever the chosen personalities settle down, the place shall have its importance and sanctity. AP. Verse 3. The begetter, i.e. the first begetter of man, i.e. Adam, and the begotten, the human race as a whole or Abraham the begetter of Ishmael who assisted Abraham in building the Holy Kaaba, the house of God, and in whose seed is the Holy Prophet, refers to Adam as a chosen one and what he begot, of the chosen ones of God. AP. Verse 4. It is a well-known fact that man has been mysteriously created with distress and difficulties, pangs and pains connected with his birth and is placed in the world to face distress, difficulties and miseries to live in toil and labor and also in mental worries of which not a single human soul could be free since the birth of the first man on earth till the end of the world, and with the burden of the responsibility of his accountability in the ultimate. 18. For all his days are sorrows, and his travail grief, yea, his heart taketh not rest in the night. This is also vanity. Eccles 2:23. Verse 5. Let no man even for a while imagine that there is none over him to control or to take an account of his motives and deeds. Verse 89. 14 clearly warns man to beware, saying, Thy Lord is watchful. Verse 6. This is what the disbelievers said when they saw Islam progressing in spite of all their wealth which they exhausted to obstruct its march. 19. They at last felt their spending away the wealth to stop the Holy Prophet from preaching the truth, i.e. Islam from spreading was all a waste, being of no avail at all. And what some hypocrites felt and said that at their embracing Islam they had been made to spend in dispensing the prescribed poor rate and the other charities which they deemed as a waste of their wealth. It is clearly indicated here that wealth is given to man as a trial to test his disposition with it. Verse 7-10. The way of righteousness has been shown and explained by Islam and the way of evil has been pointed out and warned against, informing man of the evil consequences if it, both the ways have been shown. And man has been given eyes and mouths, with the eyes man can see the facts and differentiate between the right and the wrong, and the mouth is given to speak, i.e. to inquire about the truth and also to speak it out, tongue to taste the right food and the wrong one, before he devours anything and everything. The eye and the mouth are the two highways shown to man. A proper pondering over this will disclose the significance of this reference to the great gifts of the all-merciful providence. 20. Verse 10. Refer to 76, 3 and 91, 8. In this verse clearly assert that man has been gifted with the power of discrimination and discretion between right and wrong, i.e. one should depend on this native endowment to some extent, independent of the guidance from without, through the apostles, or rather it can be said that without the inborn guidance, i.e. the power of reason, there would be no use of the external guidance. AP. Verse 11 and 12. The path of righteousness is well known to be an uphill task, for it needs to conquer one's self, fighting one's own passion of the carnal desires which go on forging luxuries which are forbidden, and thus lead A restrained life in this world. See Math. 7:14, and man is least inclined to adopt it. This has been referred to also by the Holy Prophet Jesus. Because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way, which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. Math 7:14. Verse 13. Note the setting free of the slave has been so highly commended. Islam controlled slavery in such a graceful and practical way that it made the maintaining of a slave a great responsibility for the master. And at the same it enjoined so much care and kindness to the slaves that when they were duly maintained, the slaves themselves, in many cases when they were freed, did not like to have the freedom and to leave their masters. For the facilities to be given to the slaves to earn their freedom, see Fiqh. Single quote. Verse 14 to 17. Note the care of the orphans, the needy, the destitute prescribed in all the acts of charity, as the test of the degree of the sincerity of the one in the faith. Then said unto them Salah the apostle of God, it is the she-camel of God, leave her and its drink. 91:13. But they belied him 6 and hamstrung her, so crushed them their Lord for their sins, and leveled them all with the ground. 91:14. And he feareth not any one against the consequences they met. 91:15. Commentary. Verse 1. In the verses 1 to 7 the solemn appeal is made to the reflective faculty mankind has been endowed with. Each one of the objects in whose name the swearing is done, if studied intelligently, is one of the manifestations of God's might and wisdom which none else besides him could ever be imagined to effect. The sun, even to this day, with the boasting of the human intellect about the progress it has made, is a mystery. None could ever even presume definitely what the matter is that burns so continuously for all the unknown millions of years of its age. The sun, with its natural properties and the influence it has over the other heavenly bodies and the blessing it is, to the earth, is nothing but a mystery which has proved itself insolvable for man. Some commentators interpret saying, the mystic aspect of the mention of the sun in this verse and the moon in the next, is that the sun stands for the Holy Prophet and the moon for Ali, who succeeded him as the first holy Imam, spreading the light of the truth as it emanated from the Holy Prophet. Ms. Verse 2. The moon following the sun, and its native reflective property, its acting as the substitute of the sun in illuminating the world as the sun's vicegerent, the contrast in its effect of the coolness, in its light quite different from the heat-producing light of the sun, though the light reflected by the moon is nothing else other than the light of the sun, and what makes the same light of the sun to become the opposite in effect in nature, to its original properties it possesses before the reflection, is another mystery left till now for the scientists to only speculate and imagine, and to go on revising their own theories, one after another. Tala, meaning, following of a thing as a consequence of another one as antecedent, i.e. the former is next to the latter, deriving its strength from it. In this sense it has been used 7. AP. Verse 3. The day, its duration with fully regulated working of the phenomenon of the dawn and the dusk, the revealing aspect of the sun's glory and effect on earth and all the earthly beings and their activities in it, its end and its fully regulated repetition of the renewals and its closure, is a mystery to any intelligently active mind. It is a proof positive to tell man that as the day is renewed and the sleeping world is once again resurrected, the Lord will one day effect the final death and the final resurrection for the final judgment. Verse 4. The disappearance of the sun concealing the light, making man an animal to rest, restore once again the quietude to make man thoughtful that as the day has disappeared and the world ceases to be active, there is one day for the world to sleep in its getting extinct at the will of its almighty author. The inimitable beauty that the skies manifest in their glorious exhibition of the heavenly bodies, each one of whom is a wonder by itself. The changing phases, the appearance of the starry show in the skies, and the gradual increase of the darkness and the cool atmosphere and the return to the dawn, all in a fully regulated cycle, almighty system, even to this day is nothing but a wonder to the human intellect. Verse 5. The firmament above the skies with the rain-giving clouds, and the wonderful harmony with which the heavenly bodies work, in a wonderfully organized teamwork with the mighty control of the omnipotent will, the raising of the water to be stored in the clouds, the distribution of the rain to the various parts of The earth according to mysteriously planned allotment of the fixed annual quota, and thousands of the other marvels, are too great and unapproachable for the human intellect to assess the correct value or worth of even a single one of them. The three passages, verses 5 to 7, the references to the mechanism of heavenly bodies and their functioning harmoniously in the earth, its expansion in a harmonious way into the soul and the harmonious functioning of its various faculties. AP. Verse 6. The earth, with the invaluable stores of minerals, metals, liquids and gases treasured in it, and its usefulness to life on it, its rivers and springs, the wide, deep and mighty oceans, its fixed and immovable mountains, the various kinds of climate in the different parts of it, with the variety of its soil and its appearance and its properties, it being in global form and yet serving as a plane to the habitations, and the innumerable other wonderful properties and its unlimited usefulness, all these are the great marvels which only an intelligent study can disclose. Verse 7. The soul, particularly the human, is one of the greatest mysteries of the universe. The different faculties endowed in it, its gradual development or progress in consciousness, the zenith of the same soul which, at its birth could not utter even a single syllable and which could not help its body to take a turn of its own accord, becomes the best gymnast, best scholar and the best sage. Every soul by itself is a separate wonder. Verse 8. The soul was inspired by God, its almighty and all-wise author, the consciousness and the faculty of discretion to distinguish impiety and piety, the right conduct and the wrong ways of life. This is the most invaluable gift granted exclusively to man. Make it known to it what is vice and what is virtue. Vices are termed as fujor, meaning bursts, and virtue is taqwa, guarding, to indicate that vices are the outcome of loose conduct and virtue is the outcome of self-control and willpower. The example is given in verse 12. AP. Verse 9. The success of every human individual, male and female, has achieved the right goal of this life, the salvation, depends upon preserving the soul in its original purity against its getting soiled, polluted and clouded by the carnal desires, by submitting it to the will and the pleasure of the Lord. 8. Verse 10. Corruption in the faith in the true God, the Lord, and the failure of the control over the self against its rebellious passions towards the realization of the carnal desires, leads the soul in the march of life, to perdition. Verse 11 to 14. The prophet was Salah. The above verses invite the attention of man, to the fate of the people 9 who acted rebellious to the instructions of Apostle Salah and hamstrung the she-camel, which was sent as a trial, which conduct of the people brought perdition to them. Verse 14. Hamstrung with no reason, save the rebellious nature which made them commit the heinous act. And the happiness in the hereafter, and the other who aims at the hereafter sacrifices the luxuries and the ease of this life and bears the miseries and trials patiently and willingly. Verse 5. He who practices charity and gives away alms and guards himself against evil. Verse 6. He who has faith in God with conviction of his heart, does good to the world. Note, Islam, wherever it has demanded faith in God, has also made it conditional, its being accompanied with good deeds, i.e., goodness to the others. Mere verbal expression or the observance of any rituals do not prove the faith, unless the faith manifests in the sincere acts of goodness to the others in the world. He who loves God will naturally love all that God loves and hate all that displeases him. The love of good and hatred against evil is the only and the great proof of the genuineness of the claim to the faith. Verse 7. The first holy Imam Ali ibn Abu Talib says that once the Holy Prophet, attending the funeral of a man with a stick in his hand and striking it on the ground, said, "For everyone there is space in the heaven, and also in the hell." A man asked, "O Apostle of God, then, shall we not act?" The Holy Prophet replied, "You go on discharging your duties. Everyone has been created with an allotment of some work." Saying this, he recited this verse, i.e., God has provided with the facilities for every kind of work man chooses for himself. If he chooses good deeds, he is helped and he creates a place for himself in the heaven, and if he chooses any evil, there are the facilities for that also, and having done the evil, he creates a place for himself in hell. Wahidi, in his famous work, Asbab un-Nazul, narrates on the authority of Ibn Abbas that a man found A palm tree, a branch of which was bent towards the house of a poor man who had a large family. Sometimes the owner of the palm tree took the fruits, and if by chance some date would fall in the poor man's house and his children picked it up, the owner would come and snatch them away from their hands and even from their mouth. The poor man complained to the Holy Prophet, who asked the owner if he would give him, Holy Prophet, the tree in question, in return for a palm tree in paradise. The man declined with the plea that the date of this tree is so delicate that he could not give it up. There was another man named Abu Hudda, who heard what the Holy Prophet promised the owner. He said, "O Prophet of God, would you promise the same to me if I get the palm tree from the owner and give it to you?" The Holy Prophet said, "Yes." He got the palm in exchange for 40 trees of high quality and presented it to the Holy Prophet, who gave it to the poor man. This illustrates the significance of the passage. No illustration or Shan al-Nuzul restricts any significance of any of the verses of the Holy Quran, as said the sixth Holy Imam. It is clear that man's salvation and eternal happiness depends on the strength of the faith and good deeds. AP. Verse 8. He who practiced niggardliness and became carefree of the life hereafter and did not think of providing for himself for that life by being righteous, doing charity in this world. Verse 9. He who disbelieved and did not accept the truth willingly, with a sincere heart. Verse 10. Those described in the above two verses will not be entitled to any merciful relief from the evil consequences of his own evil, i.e. the miseries and the tortures he will get in the life hereafter and on the day of the final judgment. Verse 11. The occasion for the revelation of this surah is said to be as follows. In the house of one of the Ansars, one of those Madanites who helped the Holy Prophet on his migration from Mecca to Medina, was a date palm. The branches of the palm hung in the neighbor's house. Whenever the neighbor used to get up on the palm to take the dates, and if any dates fell into his neighbor's house and the neighbor's children picked them up, the man used to get down and snatch away even the 1 or 2 dates picked up by the young children, and even if the children had put the fruit into their mouths, the man used to put his finger in their mouth, and take it out of their mouths, even the half-bitten or already munched parts of the date. Sometimes the man would even beat the children. The neighbor reported the matter to the Holy Prophet, who called the man and asked if he would sell the palm in exchange for a date palm in the heaven. The man refused and said that he would sell it in exchange for 40 palms, for the palm used to yield profusely. Abu Hudda immediately purchased the palm for the price of 40 palms in Medina and sold it to the Holy Prophet in exchange for the palm in the heaven, promised by the Holy Prophet. The Holy Prophet went to the poor neighbor of the niggardly man and gifted the palm to him. This surah was revealed in praise of Abu Hudda, condemning the niggardly man, though the immediate application of the matter of the surah was for Abu Hudda and the niggard, but it has the common application of it. He who acts in any of the positions will have the return attached to the goodness and the evil respectively. No amount of wealth amassed in this life will be of any avail at all on the day of judgment, when only the purity of faith and goodness in deeds will be counted. Verse 15. Ashka is the superlative degree, shaki, i.e. the unfortunate one, thus the punishment mentioned in verse 14 above will be for the most unfortunate one, i.e. the one who has not availed of the lifelong respite given to seek the pardon of the all-merciful Lord and went on persistently and deliberately sinning for his whole life. Verse 17. Atka, the most guarded one against evil. This is the superlative of Taka, in contrast to Ashka, in verse 15 above. Verse 18. Yatazaka, i.e. seeking purity, i.e. nothing but the pleasure of God and not for any show or fame. Note, the highest degree of the excellence in the motive of charity which Islam demands. Verse 19. The one who sincerely gives anything in charity or spends in the way of the Lord, not in return for any good already done to him or even in the expectation of any return for it, from the one whom he does the good. Verse 20. The act of charity or goodness is done merely to earn the countenance, i.e. the pleasure of the Lord, the Most High. Verse 21. Such a wholehearted devotee of God shall find God's pleasure as he expects. Atka, i.e. the most pious ones are those whose one and the only aim of their life is explained in 6. 164. And the most honorable with God are Also only those who guard themselves the most, against evil. 11. With the variance in the degree of piety and righteousness, will also naturally be the degree of the heavenly bliss that will be meted out. Hence the heaven or paradise of the Atka, or those, Nafs al-Mutmainah, the perfectly satisfied soul, mentioned in 89:27, will be God's own heaven as He Himself names it in 89:30, which is His absolute pleasure. In Islam, this degree of piety could be found in the Holy Prophet and his al-Bayt who have been granted by God Himself the exclusive excellence of perfect purity, having been purified by God Himself. 12. And as to the beggar, chide him not. 93:10. And as to the bounties of thy Lord, thou announce them unto others. 93:11. Commentary. Verse 1. Doha, i.e. the glory of the earliest moments of the dawn that heralds the arrival of the light of the sun, which gradually increases in its brightness and heat. 7. It is practically the resurrection of the light of the day and its activities when after dark, stillness or quietness of the night, the life on earth is once again quickened. The darkness of the night does not mean that God has forsaken the light for all times, and similarly the stillness or the quietness of the night does not mean that the daily life and its activities have once for all been forsaken. The darkness, and its quietness, has to go, and in its place light and activity has again to be returned. The darkness and its quietness is in its own place essential to give those who labor hard during the light and the heat of the day, to rest, and those who are eager after any spiritual development or progress are also given an opportunity of solitude and silence to concentrate and meditate, and develops the latent faculties endowed in them to get into communion with the All-Divine. The earliest hours of the dawn are best hours for man's getting God-minded. Verse 2. Things or qualities are understood better by the contrast with their opposites. The darkness, the silence, the stillness of the night is mentioned to compare and contrast with the light, the life and the activity of the day. An insight into the marvels of the phenomenon active on the wonderful forces of nature will help man to realize the real significance of bringing such daily occurrences to witness the greatness and the glory of the Almighty Author of the universe. Verse 3. In the early stages of the ministry, there was some suspense or a short interval between a revelation and another. The pagans of Mecca taunted that God had forsaken the Holy Prophet and started a slander to the effect. But neither this nor even the worst of the tortuous persecution had in the least affected the feelings of the Holy Prophet, though an apostle of God like Jesus is reported by the Christians themselves to have cried in the agony, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" 8. The crier was not in fact Jesus, the Spirit of God, but the one crucified in his stead. The brief pause is said to be only of a short duration, viz. 2 or 3 days sb. The occasion was as follows. At the open declaration of Islam, the pagans of Mecca had written to the Madanites, most of whom were Jews and Christians, about the apostleship claimed by the Holy Prophet, to verify the matter with their scriptures and inform them of the truth or the fallacy in the claim with regard to any prophecy they might find about the advent of any one like him. The reply came telling them to put the 3 questions to the Holy Prophet, and if he answers all the 3 or even 2 of them, he would surely be the promised Apostle of God. The 3 questions were: 1. The story of the fellows of the Eve. 2. The double-horned one. 3. What is a soul? The Holy Prophet replied that he never spoke anything but only that which was revealed to him, and he would wait for the revelation of the answers from God. For some days together, no revelation came, and the pagans started slandering and taunting that God has forsaken the Holy Prophet. The revelation came after a few days. The delay in the communication from God was obviously a divine plan to put the people to a trial and to disclose how eager they were and how impatiently they only waited for the least opportunity to persecute God's apostle. It is also misinterpreted that since the Holy Prophet, while promising the replies to the questions, did not say, if God wills, i.e. he did not rely upon God, the consequence was the delay. This story is an untenable conjecture, because the very fact that he said that he would reply only when God reveals to him the answers, which clearly implies dependence or reliance only upon God's will. This verse was revealed not by way of any solace to relieve the Holy Prophet of the burden of any effect of the taunts of the disbelievers on his divinely conditioned mind, but it was only in reply to the taunts and slander and to remove the evil effect of it on the mind of the common man, this declaration was made. It is paradoxical to imagine that the one conditioned by God himself for the fulfillment of his own plan to deliver his final word to mankind and to reform the human race as a whole in all aspects and all walks of life, and who was purified to the maximum extent possible, to have still labored under the common weakness of the mind to be affected by mere taunts from an ignorant and degenerate people like the pagans of Mecca, which even ordinary man with the common sense intact would patiently bear. Regarding the occasion for the revelation of this passage, commentators have given different accounts. All that the passage itself implies is that due to some delay in revelation, the opponents remark that God has forsaken him and God getting tired of him, which is negated by the passage, and from reading this with the subsequent verses the justification of the oath to begin with, is obvious to mean that, the life might have ups and downs, but this does not affect the fact that thou art in the constant care of the Lord. A.P.